Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel, Teresa's Crafty Cabana. I wanted to talk about discovering Gelli Printing from my own account. I think the number one question that I get asked and the number one thing I kind of ask myself is, what do I do with all of my Gelli prints, first of all? And what inspires me, or what different ways am I figuring out how to use my Gelli plate? A lot of people don't use their Gelli plate quite as often as I do, but I've only been using it so much because I'm fascinated by it and all of the things that I can make with my Gelli plate. So this video is just going to kind of sum up what I think of as discovering Gelli printing, and also hopefully encouraging those of you that maybe don't know how to use your Gelli plate that well or aren't too confident in using it. Just different ways that you might find use for it. And for those of you that are very fluent in using your Gelli plate, I love to learn from you. So kind of see where I'm at, but if anyone has any suggestions or recommendations for me, I love learning from this community. So let's get into what I wanted to talk about today. I'm starting with these Gelli prints that I pulled out of my stash that I've made over the years. And when I look at a Gelli print after I've printed it and put it away and haven't used it, I kind of look for what grabs my eye, and it can be used for inspiration. So I don't always have to turn my Gelli prints into something. Sometimes I use them to get color inspiration, maybe design, layout, or even some kind of new way of mixing my mediums together to come up with a new way of using my Gelli plate. So I'm not going to talk about all the steps that I'm doing in each of these prints. Instead, I just wanted to kind of talk about my Gelli printing journey and let you know what I've learned along the way. So long before I got a Gelli plate, I had heard of a Gelli plate, but I hadn't found enough of a reason for myself to purchase one. They weren't exactly cheap, and if it was something that I wasn't going to use very often, I didn't really want to spend the extra money, which I'm sure there's some of you out there that kind of feel the same way. I know you can make them, but I also didn't find myself inspired enough to even make my own Gelli plate. But what got me to finally pick up a set of Gelli plates is they had a sale at Michael's. I think it was like buy one get one half off. It was enough of a sale for me that I was able to get two, even though they still weren't that super cheap. But I knew I had been kind of hearing about them a little bit more, and sometimes what pushes me to try something is just by getting it and having it and kind of learning about it more. So once I had them in my possession, I knew I wanted to learn from other artists and people who use their Gelli plate, but also wanted to learn, different ways that people use their prints. So I started going on YouTube and Instagram, Facebook, just the usual places to get inspiration and find artists. And one of the artists, Gelli printers that I came across, she's actually a card maker, and her name is Tiffany Solario, and she has a really cool collection of how she uses her distress inks, a nice array of colors and everything. So, and she always picks out really nice colors that I wouldn't normally pick out myself. So I find I'm always drawn to the colors she chooses and how she kind of puts her mediums together to do her mixed media. So I found one of her videos that had a distress ink. I think it was distress oxide inks, and she was making like an ombre, brayering them on the Gelli plate. And I'd never even thought that you could use inks on a Gelli plate. So, because the whole time I thought it was for just acrylic paints. So that kind of caught my eye, because that would bring a whole new use for me, because I have distress inks that I don't use as often, and I love using my distress inks. So I thought that that was okay, another reason that I would probably use a Gelli plate. And then she had another video that came out, I don't know if it was around the same time or shortly after, and it was using alcohol inks on the gel plate, and that was even something that I was learning at the time and very interested and fascinated with the, different ways to use alcohol inks. They're not very predictable in the way that she was using it on the Gelli plate. I thought that was so cool. So when I got my Gelli plate, I was able to kind of learn a few things just from, my research that I had been doing. That's where I decided to start my channel. There really wasn't all that much out there. A few artists that used it in a way that I would use the Gelli plate, but most of the artists out there that used the Gelli plate, it wasn't really my style, and I think that's why it took me so long to get one. I didn't see me using it for the purpose that I had seen it traditionally used. I'm very much drawn to color, bright color, shiny, sparkly, anything like that. If you've watched my videos, I hardly ever have neutrals going on just because I love color so much, and I'll usually ground a print that has a lot of color with some kind of a neutral, but for the Gelli printing purposes, I really like to use a lot of color or a variety of colors and mix them together and see what happens. So those were a couple of mediums that I knew I wanted to try on my Gelli plate. So that's what got me started. And as I started my channel and started Gelli printing with the mediums that I was most interested in trying on my Gelli plate, I started discovering more and more with the textures and the different ways that you could make layers. Also, I started learning of different mediums in the acrylic world, which I never really thought much of. I mostly just started out with my craft paints that I had in my supply. After about a year of Gelli printing, I was approached by PM Artist Studio. So Mariah reached out to me, and I think someone from her channel had watched my channel and they'd mentioned it on one of their lives, and she reached out to me, and I thought it was really, really cool that she was reaching out to me. And then she had made these stencils. I guess they print them, or cut them out with their cutting machine, and they use designers in the crafty community that they're a part of that create these stencils and also use them in their Gelli printing. So I was opened up to a whole new world of number one Gelli printers, but different artists, different styles, different ways of using the Gelli plate that I really never thought of before. So those were like the really exciting parts of this journey for me, was meeting people along the way. Most of you, some of you that are watching even, that have kind of been cheering me on from the beginning, but have also helped me get through some, questions that I've had with how to use certain things, what works, what doesn't, just with your own experience. So I've really appreciated that and found that very helpful and also inspiring. One of my favorite mediums that I've discovered along the way, and this was from PM Artist Studio, was the golden fluid acrylics. I never really thought that I would like a fluid paint because I prefer the thicker consistency of acrylic paint, but I really love the colors and transparency and just all the ways that these colors kind of mix and make fun new colors, and they're just so beautiful when they print out on paper. That's become one of my new favorite acrylic paints. And then, of course, the stencils that I've used from PM Artist Studio, those are so versatile. And all the ways I've been able to kind of create interesting prints from those stencils. So I think that this has been very, very fun for me. I also was able to experiment with perfect pearls, and that was such a fun medium for me to discover on the Gelli plate, only because in my past use of perfect pearls, I've always had to use some kind of a sticky ink, or I guess you could like do a two-way glue that dries and then you could kind of brush the powders onto it. But all the ways that I've used the perfect pearls, they have a shine, of course, but when I pull the print that has a perfect pearl on it, the shine is so impressive, and it's just so much more vibrant of a shine, and the pearl is all there. Whereas in the other ways that I've used it, it's there, but it's not all there. I don't know if that makes any sense, but if you've used perfect pearls on like Versamark ink, brushed it over it, you might know what I'm talking about. It's shiny, but it's not like super vibrant and pigmented. That's why I kind of fell in love with using my perfect pearls on the Gelli plate, and you don't have to seal it. I don't have it rub off on my hands or anything like that. And you can use stencils to make designs with it, however you want. So I've really enjoyed the pearls, and that also led me to a commenter who introduced me to trying eyeshadows. So if you don't have the perfect pearls, eyeshadows are usually some kind of a mica powder, and those work great as well on a Gelli plate. So I think there's so many different ways to learn what you can do and what you can use on the Gelli plate. Once I discovered what other artists were using their Gelli prints for, it also got me thinking. I'm a card maker mostly. In my past life, I did scrapbooking, and I was really starting to get into making little books, like mini books with pictures in it. But going on this journey has kind of gotten me to trying the mini books with the Gelli printing and the die cuts that I can make from my Gelli prints or from cardstock. I think one of the favorite ways that I've started using my Gelli prints is with mixed media. That's always been something that's kind of scared me. I tend to be a safe crafter or maker, so mixed media has definitely pushed me to try new things. And I think that's the point of mixed media. You start with something, but that's not going to be what it is when you're finished with it. Mixed media has pushed me a lot in this Gelli printing world to let myself kind of just make messes and also make ugly prints. Those are the prints that help me know, okay, what I would and wouldn't do, and I usually still learn something from that. So let me know in the comments, what is something in Gelli printing that you've learned that you tend to use each time you Gelli print? Is there something, either a paint, a stencil, a design, a texture, a layering process that you've been drawn to since Gelli printing? Or do you like mixing it up and just going with the flow and just figuring out what you're going to Gelli print? I'd love to hear from you. One of my favorite things is creating layers on the Gelli plate. I've seen a lot of prints that are layers on top of a piece of print that's already been done, and while I think those are really cool, I think I really enjoy peeling away some of that paint and each time revealing the plate, and then coming in with different colors, some silver, some metallics, and the results are always so different to me. So I've really enjoyed that process. Like most art mediums, your paper makes a huge difference in how your prints are going to turn out. Even copy paper, there's some nice quality copy paper, and then there's copy paper that is just kind of like the cheap copy paper that's not going to give quite as nice of a result. So definitely experimenting with different papers has been really fun for me. Tissue paper's been a new thing that I've tried about a year ago, as well as rice paper. So I definitely encourage you to, see what you have around your house. This discovery of Gelli printing has definitely gotten me to look at my supplies in a whole new way. I will look at my inks and think, how could I use them? I'll look at my stamps, some textures, clay, even though I don't do clay as much nowadays, there's textures out there for clay that I've had in my supplies. They've got the little roly things that you can use to create some textures. And then if you have clay and you use it. You could use it like Play-Doh, if you saw my Play-Doh video, and you can use that to get textures off of different surfaces and jelly plate with that. So I think it's been really fun just kind of looking around and seeing what else can I print without, ruining it. Some things I want to print with, but I won't. But other things, I look at it and I think, well, I really haven't used this item, so why not jelly print with it? I've also learned a lot about my mediums. I've tried different mediums, of course, as I talked about, but playing with them and mixing them together, I've learned a lot about what they can and can't do. And understanding your mediums and papers together really makes it so that you become more fluent in this craft. And then when you want to make something on purpose, you're a lot more able to create something that you're looking to make versus pulling your jelly plate out once and thinking, I'm gonna make this particular print and it's gonna come out looking awesome. I think jelly printing definitely takes practice time, and you have to just put the time in to learn it, just like you would a program. If you're learning Adobe Photoshop or something like that, you probably aren't going to have this most beautiful thing that you made the very first time. Sometimes you accidentally do, beginner's luck, but most of the time, even when I have a print in mind, it's really hard to make that print for the first time, and then even harder sometimes to repeat it. So that's what I do to challenge myself, is I will look back through my prints and find one that really, I look at it and I think, I don't even know how I made this print. Have you ever done that? Looked at a print and wondered, how did you make it? I do that a lot, but I think they look so cool. So I actually will try to recreate that print. And by recreating it, it also helps me know, did I learn how to do this? Can I teach you how to do something if I can't even repeat it? So it is definitely helpful for me to go back and even learn from my old self, things that I was learning and loving, and coming back to those things. Because along this journey, I'll kind of get down a pathway where I break away from something to try something else new. But then there's always the love of what I first was drawn to. And so sometimes I bring those, whether they're textures or whatever it is, back into my jelly printing because I knew I loved them so much. One of those things for me is the embossed cardstock. I have a very wide array of embossing folders just because, again, I was a craft card maker, also a scrapbooker, and I used those embossing folders for 3D paper arts that I was really into. I didn't use those embossing folders as much anymore, so to have a new use for those was so cool to me, and I thought that the impressions that I get on my gel plate from those were among the best impressions, like far cooler than some of the stencils I had tried, just because it makes such a crisp impression. So, and one that I think is repeatable. So for me, that was really like a big turning point, was using those embossing folders with cardstock. I ended up embossing mine with 110-pound cardstock, and that worked out the best for me. If you're learning jelly printing or you find something that you love, if you record how you're making it, whether it's a video recording or just writing down what you did, like the steps that you did to make that, my challenge to you is try repeating one of your jelly prints. Go through your stash, find one that you've made that you think looks really cool, and see if you can recreate it. If you didn't give yourself instructions, see if you can kind of follow along and recreate a similar looking print. Doesn't have to be the exact same texture, doesn't even have to be the same colors, but maybe the same mediums and a same kind of flow or layer to it. So that's what I'm doing here. I found one of my jelly prints that I just loved. I actually found it was a short video that I'll link, I found my instructions for it. So I went to work recreating it, but to mix it up a little bit, I used the same colors. I just changed my stencil. So I'm using this paisley stencil, and in my previous print, I think I had used like water drops or something, different kind of looking stencil. It's a similar design, but the colors, to me, that's what drew me into the print to want to recreate it. When working with these alcohol inks, I removed the alcohol ink between the layer of stencil, and then I let that dry before coming in with an acrylic paint. In this case, I used a cream color Titan Buff in my golden fluid acrylics. When I had made my first print, I didn't have my fluid acrylics yet, so I just used one of my craft paints in a cream color. So that's also how I mixed it up. And then instead of using, I think I had some kind of a mesh that I had used on this layer, I ended up using these doilies for my next layer. In my previous video, my inspiration, I had used a craft silver, and this time I'm using a higher quality silver. This is from Master's Touch. I used my hammer mill 32-pound paper, which is also a paper I didn't have when I had made my first version of this print. And this is the very beautiful recreation of the print that I had for my inspiration. Of course, it's not identical, but you can see here's my inspiration print. And it's again the colors that really came out very similar, but also unique, so not exactly the same. So this was very fun for me to try to recreate a print that I had made in the past, and it was so helpful to look back on a video to be able to remember what it was I had done, especially the colors. I love those colors, so it was really nice to be able to go back to the same colors. So this is just my playtime on my Gelli printing, and discovering different ways that I would use these mediums together, I think, is one of my favorite ways to mix things up. So I just wanted to leave you with that, and that will conclude this video. I hope to hear from you, and I hope you enjoyed watching and hearing about this process for me, and I hope you discover different ways of using your Gelli plate and your prints. As always, thanks for watching. Happy crafting, y'all.